All right, I'm going to continue on. I like this picture, I guess, a little better than the one I showed you before, because you'll notice there's no straight lines that are going from the view to the model. I don't know if I agree exactly with their dotted lines, etc., but the controller is the brain. In fact, more often than not, the controller is referred to as kind of the supervisor, because it decides typically which model to call, all right, to get the data that's needed, and then it does what has to be done to be able to send that data over to the view. Okay, maybe not the greatest explanation, but that's the one that you're getting. So, all right, so what we want to do then is we want to come in here into our employee controller file. Now, literally 100 times out of 100 times when you are writing a controller, the first two lines are going to be this. You'll do your const express equals require express. All right. Now, don't type what I'm about to put in. We've been doing this. We've been saying const app equals express. That's not the way that you do it when you're inside of a controller. All right, because the controller has got a special method inside of it that's called basically router. All right, so what you typically say, so instead of saying like app.get, etc., you say router.get. So we're going to say in here const router equal express dot router, and it has to be a capital R or it won't work correctly. And you'll notice, all right, that this is great. It won't be in just a minute. So what do we want to do here? Well, we've already talked about this. All right, in fact, I'm going to go and grab this that I put in here before, and I'm going to get rid of this. And get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of all my blank lines that are in here. And I'm going to copy all this. And I'm going to put it in here, but I'll put it in between comments. So this is what we want to do. We want to be able to get all employees. We want to be able to get a single employee. We want to be able to update a single employee. We want to be able to create a single employee, and we want to be able to delete a single employee. Does all that make sense? All right. In fact, I'm going to make it even easier on myself, okay? If you remember, I know I'm going to get those errors, but if I highlight all this and I do a control there, okay? Why did I do that? Because I'm going to write them now one at a time. So we're going to write this one, then we'll write this one, etc. Does that make sense? In fact, what we'll probably do, we'll write the get all, and then we'll talk about the other ones. Okay? All right. So when we get done now at the very bottom, notice again, see how we call that router right there? So down at the bottom now, I can uncomment this, and I can say module.exports equal router. And as soon as I say that, now that's no longer grayed out. See that? All right. And what that is going to do between that line right there and the other line that we put into server.js, that's opening up the communication mechanism between the two files. All right. So I don't have to do this, but I can write, for lack of better words, kind of templates for each one of these. What do I mean? Well, I'll show you. So I'm going to want to come in here and say router.get, all right, request response, fat arrow function, and then there'll be some code in here, all right, and that's going to be the code that we have to put in to be able to get everything, to be able to have, show us all of our employees. Now, once we put that code in, if we run this, does it make sense to everybody? It's going to come back with an empty array because we haven't put any records in yet. All right. Now, when we only want one employee, it's going to be a little bit different, but I'm still going to copy this. All right, what do I mean that it's going to be a little bit different? Well, we have to come in here, and after this, we'll have to put in an ID. All right, and where are we going to get that ID from? Well, again, I'll put it in just a minute, but for now I'm just going to comment this out. We're going to say request.params.id. So from the request object, one of the parameters that's going to be available to us is going to be that ID parameter. That's what I'm telling you. All right? So that's going to be our router.get for a single one of these. All right? And next, let's just go down to this one here, because it's almost the same as this one. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to come down, not under the create, but under the patch. Because again, we're going to put here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to patch, right there. And then I'm going to do the same thing down at the bottom here, but I'm going to put here delete. All right. Got a lot of white space in here, so I'm just going to get rid of a little bit of it. Now, with what I'm about to tell you, this should make sense. If I'm getting all employees, I don't have to provide any information because I'm getting all employees. If I'm just getting a single employee, I have to provide information. It has to know which one I want. If I'm going to be modifying an employee, it has to know which one, because I don't want to modify all of them. You know, if Angie's an employee and her address changes, I don't want to do it where I modify everybody, because then everybody would have that address. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. And the same thing with delete. All right. The one place where we won't need this, we don't need an ID, will be in the create. Because that's when the ID is going to, for lack of better words, it's almost going to be created for us. I don't know if you call it that, but we'll just say that for now. All right. All right. So before we write this, let's figure out what each employee is going to look like. Does that make sense? So I'm going to do a file save. All right. Oops. I don't know why I did that. Try that again. File, save. There we go. All right. And I'm going to come in to my models folder right here. All right. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to create my employee model. Now, you can call this whatever you want. Since I called my controller employee controller, to me it makes sense to call this employee model. Not everybody agrees with that, all right? But that's what I'm going to call it. So I'm going to call it here employee model, model.js, all right? And what this model is going to contain is, for lack of better words, the equivalent of the schema. Now, if you use straight if you use straight MongoDB without using Mongoose, I think you'd agree with this the other day. We didn't make any stinking schemas. We just started dropping stuff in, and we let the system figure out what was in there. All right? And you can still do it like that. But when you use Mongoose, typically you put in a model file, and in that model file, you put in what you want the schema to look like. So, well, the first thing is we better add Mongoose here. So const Mongoose equals require Mongoose. All right. And then we want to come in and start figuring out what we want this to look like. All right. So, again, I'm going to put in here a const, and you can call it whatever you want, but I'm going to call it employee schema. And the syntax in here, granted, it's a little weird, but all I can tell you is I didn't make it up. All right. So we say const employee schema equals, and here we say new mongoose dot schema, and we put everything inside of a paren and a curly brace. So this is where we're going to define the schema is going to be in here. All right. And like I said, now I'm going to put some stuff in here I'm going to leave it blank, but we're going to come back and fill it in just a second. So I'm going to say, well, each employee is going to have a name. And there'll be some stuff that we put in here. Don't worry about what the stuff is yet. All right, so we're going to say name, and whoops, and we're going to put in a curly brace. And we have to separate, and literally after each one of these, put a comma. So each employee is going to have a name. We're going to say each employee has got a department. And I'm just making this stuff up. All right, we're going to say that each employee, come on, stop it. Each employee has a salary. We're going to assume that all employees are salaried employees. And we're going to say that each employee has a hire date. And there should have been a semicolon after this. And there should have been a semicolon after this. All right, don't worry if anything does come up in here and it looks like there are errors, we're gonna fix it in just a minute. I just wanted to show you the setup, so to speak, for this. All right? So if we want to be able to refer to an employee name, it's just going to be name. And again, could have made this first name and last name. I just decided it's easier. I'm basing some of this at least loosely off an example I found online. They had all sorts of fields. But it's like I didn't see the need to do that. All right. Now, if you go up and look in the documentation for Mongoose, it talks a lot about the different data types. I already showed you where that thing was, but you can see those. So what you have to say in here is basically, okay, so we're going to come in here, we're going to say, what type of data is this? And, not going to spell right. The type is going to be string, and it has to be capitalized, and required is going to be true. So you'll notice that every employee will have to have a name, okay? It's required. It's going to be the only field that's required in here. Because it's possible, we just hired Angie. Where's she going to work? I don't know. How much is she going to make? I don't know. I think we're going to hire her. You know, we could put hire date in there, and we'll just put a default in for that one. All right. In fact, I guess we can make that one true, because I suppose if they bring you in, you're going to get hired. So, all right. So for department, again, the type will be string. But since it's not required, I could put in there required false, but that's kind of a waste, in my opinion, to put that in there. So for salary, I'm going to put in here type, and it's of type number. And again, we're not going to make it required. Now, what I want you to understand, let me put this last one in here. So this will be type date. We will say it's required. So required, true, and we're going to default it to date.now, which is today's date. All right? But I want you to understand something, so I'm going to give you a second to key that in, and then I'm going to save it when I'm done. Put a semicolon at the end here, and then save. All right? When we end up going into either Thunder Client or Postman in just a bit to actually play with this and run it, etc., this says it's not going to work if you try to enter a new employee in and you don't give them a name and you don't give them a hire date. Does that make sense? Now, what I said, in a way, is a lie, because if you leave off a hire date, it's going to default to the current date. But we can put in a department, but we don't have to. We can put in a salary, but we don't have to. Those are things we could leave off and then use a patch and add one or both later, as an example. All right? So again, what I'm showing you here is this is the schema that we're putting in for this. Okay? All right. All right, so now we're going to go down to the bottom here. And as we did before, we're going to say module.exports. equal mongoose dot model. Now, what we put here is a name we make up. But since we're working with employees, you make it singular. I'm just going to say employee right here. And after that, I put in, what did we call this schema right here? We called it employee schema, right? So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put that in here. Like that. So I'm asking you this question, okay? Does the main part of our program, the main part, the server.js, does it need to know about this file? The answer is no, but the controller does. The controller will have to talk to this file. So we're going to have to make this available in our controller file. We'll do that in just a second, all right? What I'm asking, though, is looking at this, forgetting about the exports line for just a second, because I want to hopefully fit in all of this here. Well, it's close enough, I guess. Is there anything in there that doesn't make sense? All right. There's all sorts of stuff that you can put in for this, just so you know. For example, there's ranges for salary. So you could put in, you know, the equivalent of greater than or equal to 0 and less than 1 million, let's say. So you can put in minimums and maximums. All right. For departments, you know, for all these fields, you can put their size requirements that you can put in. So if you want to say a name can't be more than 25 characters or 50 characters or whatever. So there's a lot of that. I'm skipping a lot of that stuff. All right. I'm figuring that if you want to see more of that, you can go back and take a look at the documentation. All right. So I'm going to do my file save. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think we're going to need this file to do anything else with it anymore, so I'm just going to close the employee model.js file, and I'm going to go back to my controller file here. All right? And up at the top of my file, remember I put in these two things, const express and const router? All right? Now I'm going to put in here const employee equal require. Now, before I put this in, I will in just a second, but before I do, think about this. All right? Where are we right now? We are in the controllers folder. Would you agree with that? We have to go from the controllers folder, we've got to go up, get out of the controllers folder and go up to the models folder so we can find that model. Does that make sense? All right? So we've got to give it the path to that. So we come in here and we say ... and then notice after ... which means go up a level, there's controllers. All right, there's models. We're already in controllers. We want to go to models. So models / and lo and behold, there's our employee model. Does that all make sense? And when you do this, you do not put in the .js in any of these things. You see, so if you have been putting them in, I should have said something. Remove it, okay? And you'll notice that right now, it's grayed out because we're not using it yet. Don't worry about that. We will. And it won't be that long before we will. All right. So let's go in and let's start writing these routes then. All right. So the first one we'll write, we'll do them in order, or pretty much in order. We'll do the get first. Now, when we do this, we have no idea if there are 1 billion employees. Well, that's a little ridiculous. But let's say that it's Amazon, and they've got hundreds of thousands of employees. We don't know if this is going to take a couple seconds, a couple milliseconds, whatever, and we don't know. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that async await that we talked about earlier in the semester. When we use the async await, we put the code we're trying to do inside of a try-catch block, just so you know that. But when we do this, and we want the system to know that what we're about to work with, we want this to use async await, well, we have to come over here, if you look where my cursor is, and we have to put async, not, you have to spell it right, async right there. You'll notice I didn't get any errors, but when I want to use it here, what I want to use it for, you'll see it in a minute, all right, we're going to put await. All right, they work together. You can't have an await without an async, and if you have an async, it's looking for an await. Does that make sense? And again, the idea, what async does is it allows you to do things asynchronously. So what we're basically telling the system is, hey, if you are looking for these records and they're going to take a bit of time, you can go on and do something else. All right? Okay, so we're going to use someday I'll learn to type, I guess. A try-catch block here. So there's our try, and after that, we're going to have a catch. And what we're going to try to catch is any kind of error. All right? We're going to put code in both of these in just a second. Now, one thing that I want to show you in just a couple minutes, all right, is we're going to come in and we're going to write our own middleware in here. We're going to write our own function because it'll make our lives easier. All right? When we write our own middleware function and it gets called, since it's something we wrote and it's not something that's built into Express, you may or may not remember that sometimes you put this on the end. You put rec, res, and then you put comma. Don't put it in yet. Don't put it in. Next. And you use next if you write your own middleware and you have to force it at the end to call whatever is next. All right, we don't have to put that in here, but I just wanted to show you we're going to use that in just a minute. All right, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say const employees equal await employee dot find. And I don't expect all of what I'm just doing right here to totally make sense. And if it doesn't, it's no biggie. Let me put it in because it's only 3 more lines, all right? And then after those 3 lines, all right, after those 3 lines, we'll go in and we'll go over what all of these means. I don't think we need that. But I'm going to put in here res.json employees. I'm missing something. I guess there must be one right there.
You needed that parenthesis.
Oh, you know what? I know what it is.
You said it the wrong place.
Oh, hold it. It is, first of all, I put employee, not employee. That would be a good place to start. All right. And let's see, res.json employees, okay, curly, we don't need one here. We can do it like that. Now we could have put a paren here and a paren here. That's what I had originally, but I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, do we really need those extra those extra parens? And I thought, I bet you if we remove them, it would still work. And it does. So you can do it either way. Does that make sense? All right. All right. So we're going to say res.json employees. We're going to go over what every bit of this means in just a second. And in fact, that's all we want to do here. And if there's an error, one thing you have to start understanding is, well, 2 things. Number one, if there's an error, typically you want to send back a message. You want to let the user know what happened. All right? And secondly, you may or may also want to return the status back. If you remember, we talked about 300 means it worked, those types of statuses. All right? Well, here, if we ask for all the employees and we can't get them, as long as we ask correctly, all right, it's not our problem. So we're going to come in here and we're going to say res dot status, and we're going to give it a status of 500, which means there's a problem is not on our end, but it's on the other end. And we're going to say JSON, and we'll come in here and we'll write a message, and the message will just be whatever error message the system comes up with. So put that in, and when you get done, all right, we'll go over what all of it means. All right? So in English, what this is saying is, hey, when we preface something with the slash, okay, that what we want to do is we want to attempt to find every employee there is. And if you can find them, show them on the screen as JSON. And if for some reason you can't, there'll be an error. Send back a 500 error message, which basically means it's an internal server error, and whatever other message they may come up with. Okay? All right. Now, I'm going to save this, and I have no idea because I didn't try this first. I should have, but I didn't. But I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to do this. You don't have to do this, but I'm just going to come in, and I'm going to put in http://localhost 5678/employees. And I'm hoping when I do that I don't get an error. And I didn't. I got an empty array. Does that make sense to everybody? I just told it to show us all the employees. There aren't any. So it gave me an empty array. Does what I just said make sense to people? Again, we could have gone into either here. We could have gone into here. All right, and I could have said show DBs. You don't have to do this. All right, there's emps. I could have gone in and included, just done an insert and put an employee in there. And then it would have shown that employee. Does that make sense to everybody? We can do that, but I'm not going to do that. We're going to let our program that we're writing right now, we're going to have a create in here. That's what we'll write next. And if the create works, then we'll use that, all right, to actually put in information. All right. So we've got the first one, and at least it appears as though it's working. All right. Well, the next one that I've got in here is being able to add an employee. We could do the get one, but let's just do this one right here. So go down to where you've got your post create. All right. And this will be a router.post. And it'll again be /i, just a slash. And again, it will be an async. And again, it'll be request, and response. And again, we're going to use the fat arrow function. All right. And we'll put some code in there in just a second. Again, not a lot of code, maybe 7 or 8 lines. All right, you may get an error when we write this because, again, I told you we're going to write our own function at the bottom when we get done with this to try to make it easier. So don't worry about it if you get an error. That's what I'm telling you. So we're going to say it here, kind of like we did before. We're going to say const employee equal new employee. Again, with a paren and with a curly, and hit enter, and then we're going to have to fill in some stuff. All right? And even if you think you don't, you already know what this stuff is. All right? In other words, what did we say we had in here? We said we had a name, and that will be request.body.name. All right? And it's giving me that, it may give you a line through this because name at least used to be a keyword. So, and it's considered to be deprecated right now. So if you do get that, don't worry about it. It's not going to hurt anything. All right, so we got name. I think we said next was department. Because you have to spell it right. In fact, the easiest way, you don't have to do this, but if I go back here and I look at my model, we've got name, department, salary, and hire date. Everybody see that? Those are the 4 things that we want. All right? So, name, department, which will be rec.body.department. All right, salary, which will be rec dot body dot salary, and hire date, which will be rec dot body dot hire date. All right. So in a couple minutes, when you are using either Postman or Thunder Client, all right, so if we use Thunder Client and we come in here and we go in to add a new employee, we're going to have to go and put in those parameters. And at a minimum, if we don't put in the name, we're going to get an error message. Does that all make sense? All right. All right. So very similar to what we just did before, we're going to come in here and we're going to do another try catch. I kind of like this in that we're actually using some stuff that we've talked about in earlier classes. You have looked at try catch in C#. You'll see try catch again next semester in Java. So a lot of languages incorporate the try-catch mechanism because remember, when you are talking about possible errors, this is one of the ways to catch errors. All right? Try doing this. If you get an error, catch that error. We're just saying if anything goes wrong. ERR is about as generic as it gets, just so you know. All right. So very similar to what we did before. We're going to come in here and we're going to say const employee equal await. Did we put the word await in there? Yes, we, yeah. Okay. See this? Go back up to here. I apologize. Go back up to here to your post right there. And let me double check, but I'm pretty sure that needs an O. No, not that one. This one up here. Oh, we did put an await in there. Okay, good. Forget it. All right, so we're going to do an await here. And again, we'll say, this time we're going to say employee dot, we want to save it. What does that mean? We've just filled in that information. Now we want to try to save the record. Does that all make sense to everybody? All right. And I can do this. Don't type in this, but I can do this. So I can type in status 200.json, and I can put it, in fact, you don't have to do this, but really it's a new employee, right? So maybe I'll call him new employee. New employee. All right. And that's still employee.save right there. So status.json, and I can put in the new employee right here. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but 200 just means everything was okay. It's a very generic message. A better message to use than 200 is 201. That means a new object was created. And isn't that what we just did? We just tried to create a new employee object. All right, so I think at least that's a little bit better. Okay. Now, if we get down to here, think about this. You don't have to answer. I'm not asking a question. But if we get down to here, we made an error. We didn't put in an employee name, or we put in a salary that was maybe non-numeric, etc. We screwed up. So in that case, we're going to put in here a res.status of 400, which means, whoops, and that's called put your fingers on the right keys. Res.status of 400, which means it was our fault, .json. And again, we'll put in here a message, and it'll be the error dot message. And what I want you to understand is what's going on here. I'm going to just move this up just so you can see the entire thing here. So I'm moving that up. So this is our entire create endpoint. So when we have a post, all right, What we're saying is, come in here and create a new employee object. That new employee object is of this type. Where was that defined, employee? In our model. And for that reason, it has to have a name, a department, a salary, and a hire date. Now, I didn't try this with leaving everything blank but name, but what should happen if we leave department, salary, and hire date blank, but we have to put a name, then the name will be set, the department should be null then, the salary would be null, and the hire date would be the current date. Does that all make sense? All right. And then, so this that's going on right here, that doesn't really take any time, basically. This is what could take time. This is attempting to go in and actually save it to the database. All right? So, we're creating a new employee, and we're saying employee.save. Don't use employee here and here. No. This employee right there, that one, is this one. So we're telling it, hey, we just created a new employee here. All right? And that's, again, what we're going to try to save and write out. All right? Hopefully we didn't screw up. All right, so I'm going to save this. Do a file, save all. All right? And I'm going to come back in here to Thunder Client. And you already know this, so it's there. I've got everything set right now, right? Looks like it at least. So I'm going to change this from get to post. And I'm going to start going into my parameters. For name, you can put in whatever you want. Put in your name, put in whatever you'd like. It doesn't matter. All right. For department, I'll put IT. For salary, put down what I'm worth. No, I would put $1 million then. I don't know if you all heard, but supposedly one person won that lottery yesterday. That was $700 million. Can you imagine how their life has changed today? I couldn't imagine that. So salary, let's just put in here, I'll put in 100,000. Kid, you can put in whatever you want. All right. And finally, I'm not going to put in a hire date. So it should default to today. Does all that make sense to everybody? All right. So I'm going to click send. Uh-oh, it's telling me bad request. All right, let's see if we can debug it then. Let's see what it doesn't like. http://localhost employees, name, department, IT, salary. All right. Well, first thing I want to go back is to my employee model. And yeah, there is a default in there. All right. I'm wondering if that's what the problem is, but when I tried this before it works, so let's see if we can debug it. So employee validation failed. Name path name is required. Well, I thought I put in a name. Name. There's the name. Department. Salary. Huh.
So not like the space?
No, that shouldn't matter at all. It's just a string. I mean, I can just, if I want, I could just change it to Jeff, but I'm going to guess I'm going to get the exact same error.
Yeah.
No, because that really and truly shouldn't matter. I should be able to put anything in there. In fact, a string, I'm not sure in this language, but it can be really huge. It looks like the URL is formed correctly, http://localhost:5678/employees. That's all correct. Question mark, name equals Jeff Scott, and department equals IT, and salary equals 100,000. I don't see anything there that looks bad. And what's scaring me is it's saying validation failed, path name is required, but I've got name. I called it name there as well. Well, it's early. Let's just take a 10-minute break and come back at 2:05, and I'm going to see if I can debug this during that time. All right?